I went into the hospital broken and came out betrayed. While I lay in that bed fighting to breathe, my parents sold my car, the one thing I had worked my whole life to earn, and they pocketed the money like it was theirs. They thought I was too weak to fight back. But when I returned, I didn't just take their keys. I took everything that mattered most. This is my story. My name is Kate. I'm 27 years old, and I swear the day I opened my eyes in that sterile white hospital room was the day everything I thought I could trust about family cracked apart. The beeping of machines was the first sound I heard. Steady, slow, almost hypnotic. My chest rose with effort, every breath reminding me I was still alive, still tethered here after the accident that had nearly split me in two. My leg was heavy, wrapped tight in plaster. My throat was dry, raw like sandpaper, and all I wanted was water, reassurance, and maybe the sound of my mother's voice telling me everything would be okay. I blinked hard, the light above me burning too bright, and slowly the room came into focus. The curtain was half drawn, but through it I could hear voices. Familiar voices. "We had no choice," my father's voice said, low and rough, like he'd been carrying guilt in his chest for days. "You think he'll understand?" my mother asked. Her tone wasn't worried for me. It was worried for themselves. I lay still, my heart rate climbing as the monitor betrayed me with louder beeps. I listened, every nerve in me sharp. "We needed the money," my father muttered. And that car was just sitting there. It made sense. The words slid into me like knives. I thought I'd misheard, that the painkillers were twisting their voices into something cruel. But then came the confirmation. "It was his pride, though," my mother whispered. "His first real investment." The monitor screamed with a high beep as my heart spiked. My car. Not just any car, my black Nissan Maxima. Bought with 2 years of double shifts, weekends sacrificed, every scrape tip from waiting tables at night after long days at the construction site. That car was mine, the proof that I'd clawed my way toward independence, toward something that was mine alone. And they'd sold it. The rage built so fast I forgot the pain in my body. I shifted, winced, and the sound must have startled them. The curtain pulled back and there they were. My mother with her anxious eyes, my father with that stone face he always wore when he didn't want to admit he'd done wrong. "Kate," my mother rushed forward. "You're awake." She reached for my hand, but I jerked it away. "What did you do?" My voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of thunder in that room. My father glanced at my mother. She looked down. That was all the answer I needed. "You sold my car." My voice cracked louder this time. "While I was in here." "Daughter, listen." My father stepped closer, hands out like he could calm a storm. "It was just sitting in the driveway. You weren't using it. The hospital bills." "Hospital bills." I cut him off, my blood boiling hot. "I have insurance. I've been paying for it every month. You know that. Don't lie to me." The silence between us was louder than the machines around me. My mother wrung her hands, her mouth trembling like she wanted to justify it but couldn't. I thought of the night before the accident. Me behind that wheel, windows down, music blasting, the road stretching out like a promise. That car wasn't just metal and wheels. It was my freedom, my escape from the suffocating control of this house I'd tried so hard to distance myself from. And now, as I lay trapped in a hospital bed, they had stolen it. I clenched the sheets with white knuckles. "Tell me where it is." My father's jaw set. "It's gone." Just like that. The word dropped into me, heavy and final. I wanted to scream, but the weight of betrayal pinned me down harder than any cast or 4-line. "You had no right," I whispered, my throat tight with rage and grief. "No right." My mother reached out again. "Kate, please understand. We needed help. Your father's hours were cut back, and the mortgage. So, you sold the one thing that was mine." Snap. The one thing I built for myself. without even asking. Her eyes glistened with tears, but I didn't care. Not then. Because behind her sorrow wasn't regret for what they'd done. It was regret that I'd found out. I turned my head away, staring at the blank hospital wall. My body hurt, but my soul hurt worse. I thought about all the nights I'd come home late, exhausted, and my father would sneer that I was wasting my youth on a piece of junk. My mother would tell me not to be so dramatic when I said the car meant freedom. They never understood. Maybe they never wanted to. And now they had proven it. My voice was ice when I spoke again. What else have you taken from me? The room went still. My mother's hand froze mid-reach. My father's lips pressed into a hard line. They exchanged a glance, quick, guilty, heavy with something unspoken. And in that single moment I knew. The car wasn't the only thing. The betrayal was bigger. Much bigger. Hang on, before I tell you what happened next, make sure you've subscribed and left your thoughts in the comments. This part gets intense. I couldn't sleep that night in the hospital. The beeping machines were steady, the fluorescent light buzzing softly above me, but it wasn't the environment that kept me awake. It was their faces, my parents' faces when I'd asked them, "What else have you taken from me?" That look, that flash of guilt, haunted me. I stared at the ceiling, forcing myself to piece together every moment I could remember. The truth was, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. Maybe I'd been ignoring the cracks for years, convincing myself that family meant trust, even when the signs screamed otherwise. Growing up, my parents weren't the affectionate type. My father, Martin, was all discipline and sharp words. My mother, Claire, was gentler on the surface, but underneath, she bent toward him like a tree leaning with the wind. If he said no, she said no. If he scoffed, she laughed along. They weren't cruel in the way that makes headlines, but control ran in their blood. Every choice I made was subject to their approval. When I was 16, I saved money from mowing lawns and stocking shelves at the grocery store to buy my first phone. It was nothing fancy, just a scratched-up flip phone, but it was mine. The very next week, I found out they'd sold it to pay off the power bill. "We'll get you another one when we can," my father said, not a trace of apology in his voice. That should have been the first lesson. But at 16 you convince yourself it's temporary. You tell yourself parents know best. By 21 I'd stopped believing in that fairy tale. I worked at the supermarket day by day and waited tables at a diner at night, stacking cash wherever I could. That's when I bought the car. The Nissan Maxima wasn't new, but to me it was like rolling freedom on 4 wheels. The black paint gleamed under the sun like armor. I'd sit in the driver's seat after a long shift, hands gripping the steering wheel, and feel a surge of something I'd never felt before. Control over my own life. When I drove it home the first time, I expected at least a sliver of pride in their eyes. Instead, my father shook his head. "Waste of money," he muttered. "You'll regret it when the bills pile up." And my mother, arms crossed, added softly, "You could have helped with the mortgage instead." It wasn't surprise I felt that day. It was confirmation. Confirmation that they didn't see me as independent. They saw me as an extension of themselves, another tool to use, another pocket to reach into when things got hard. And yet, despite the bitterness, I kept forgiving them. I told myself they were stressed, they didn't mean it, they just needed help. That's what good children did, right? They forgave. They endured. But forgiveness has a cost. Every time you hand it out, a little piece of you gets chipped away. Lying in that hospital bed, staring at the pale ceiling, I realized how much of me had already been carved down. I thought back to the accident, the moment everything in my life tilted. It was raining that night, the kind of heavy downpour that makes the world blurry through the windshield. I had been on my way home after a double shift. Exhausted, yes, but determined. My car felt like a fortress, the hum of the engine soothing, the seat molding around me. Then, out of nowhere, headlights swerved across the lane. Tires screeched, my body jolted, and the world went black. When I woke up, I was in that hospital room. And somewhere between then and now, my parents had decided the one thing tethering me to freedom didn't belong to me anymore. I turned on my side, ignoring the ache in my ribs, and thought about their faces again. That guilty glance. It wasn't just the car. I needed answers. The next morning, I forced myself to sit upright as my mother slipped into the room carrying a paper cup of coffee. She smiled nervously, like she was rehearsing softness. "You need anything, honey?" she asked, setting the cup on the counter. I didn't look at the coffee. "Yeah," I said flatly. "I need you to tell me the truth." Her hands froze on the cup. "Kate, don't do this now. You need to focus on healing. I asked you what else you've taken." Her eyes darted to the floor, then to the door, as if hoping my father would walk in and rescue her. "Was it money? Press. Did you drain my savings?" She shook her head quickly. No, not that." I narrowed my eyes. "Then what?" She wrung her hands. We needed help. And you weren't there. We thought." "Don't," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "Don't say you thought it was okay. You knew it wasn't." The silence stretched until the door opened and my father walked in, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. "Enough," he barked. "You need to calm down. Stress isn't good for recovery." I stared at him, my jaw tight. "Tell me where the money from my car went." He folded his arms. "It's none of your concern." None of my concern. The words made my stomach twist. It was my car, my sweat, my sacrifice. And somehow in his mind it was theirs to dispose of. I felt something shift inside me in that moment. A line being drawn in the sand. All those years of being their tool, their bailout, their safety net, it had led to this. To them taking what I'd built without even the courtesy of asking. I leaned back against the pillows, forcing a calm I didn't feel. "I'll find out," I said quietly. "One way or another, I'll find out." For the first time, I saw a flicker of unease in my father's eyes. Just a flash, but it was enough. That was when I knew the betrayal was deeper than they wanted me to see. Later that day, when they stepped out for lunch, I reached for my phone on the side table. It was cracked from the accident but still functional. I opened my banking app with shaky fingers. The balance hit me like a punch. Half of it gone. All those nights I skipped meals, stashed tips, sacrificed weekends, saving dollar by dollar. Half of it drained away. Withdrawals, checks written in my father's handwriting. My chest tightened, not just from the injury but from the realization. The car wasn't a mistake. It was part of a pattern. A theft dressed up as necessity. And this time they weren't sorry. I dropped the phone onto the blanket, my mind spinning. Rage warred with despair. My parents, the people I was supposed to trust above all, had carved into my life like it was theirs to own. I thought of the car again, the smell of the leather seats, the rumble of the engine. Sold like a trinket at a pawn shop. My fists curled. No more forgiving. No more excusing. That night, as the hospital wing fell quiet, I whispered to myself, "They've taken too much already. I'll take it back." But even as I said it, a new thought chilled me. If they could sell my car and raid my savings without flinching, what else had they taken that I hadn't discovered yet? Before we go any further, click subscribe and let me know in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? When I left the hospital a week later, the sky was gray and heavy with clouds, like even the weather understood the weight pressing on me. The wheelchair wheels squeaked as the orderly pushed me to the front doors. My leg was still weak, my ribs wrapped in bandages, but the pain in my body was nothing compared to the raw ache inside my chest. My parents were waiting outside. My father leaned against their sedan, arms crossed, his face unreadable. My mother fidgeted with her purse strap, glancing at me with that mixture of guilt and denial she wore so well. The orderly parked me near the curb, and I felt the air shift. A silence hung between us, thick enough to choke on. I looked at the driveway where my car should have been. My car, the one I dreamed about, worked for, poured myself into. All that sat there was their dented beige sedan, dull and lifeless. No Nissan. No freedom. Just absence. Ready to go home? My mother asked softly. The word tasted bitter. Whose home was it, really? I'd been paying half the bills for years, carrying burdens that weren't mine. And still, they had the audacity to strip me of the one thing that proved I could stand on my own. The ride back was silent except for the sound of tires against wet pavement. I stared out the window, my reflection pale against the glass, and promised myself I'd dig until I found every truth they were hiding. When we reached the house, it felt different. Smaller. Colder. I crunched my way inside, every corner reminding me of the years I'd given them. Years of labor, sacrifice, and obedience. But my eyes went straight to the empty spot in the driveway. That void spoke louder than anything they could say. That night, when the house settled into sleep, I pulled my phone out again. My body ached, but I ignored it, scrolling through my online banking records. There it was. A deposit from a dealership. A dealership I knew all too well. Carter's Auto Lot. A small used car dealership on the edge of town. I had nearly bought my car from them before finding a better deal elsewhere. The sight of that name on my bank statement made bile rise in my throat. They had sold my car like it was some forgotten relic. And the amount. They had undersold it. By thousands. My car had been worth at least 12 grand, even with the miles I'd put on it. The deposit. Just $5,000 gone. Either they were swindled or worse. They had pocketed the rest themselves. The next morning I confronted them. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd eaten countless dinners in silence, listening to my father's lectures about responsibility and discipline. The smell of burnt coffee clung to the air. "You sold my car to Carter's Auto," I said flatly. My father's jaw twitched. My mother froze mid-stir of her coffee. "Don't bother lying," I continued, sliding my phone across the table to show them the record. "I saw the deposit." My mother's lips parted, searching for words, but none came. My father leaned back, his face hard. "You weren't in any condition to drive," he said. "The car was a waste, just sitting there. We made a decision." A decision. My voice rose, sharp and bitter. A decision about my property. My hard-earned money. "You didn't make a decision, you stole." My father slammed his palm on the table. "Watch your tone, girl." I leaned forward, ignoring the throb in my ribs. "Don't you dare tell me to watch my tone. You had no right." My mother's eyes welled, her voice trembling. "We needed the money, Kate. The mortgage, the bills. We didn't know what else to do." I stared at her, my heart a storm of anger and heartbreak. "So you chose me. Again. You always choose me to bleed dry." The silence that followed was suffocating. For the first time they didn't try to deny it. They had taken what was mine, and they weren't sorry. I pushed away from the table, crutches clattering against the floor, and made my way to my room. My body screamed in pain, but my fury drowned it out. I shut the door behind me and collapsed onto the bed, shaking. It wasn't just the car. It wasn't just the money. It was the principle, the proof that, in their eyes, I was never truly separate. I was theirs to use, theirs to strip, theirs to sacrifice. I thought back to when I was younger, how many times I had bailed them out. The phone I lost. The times they borrowed from my paycheck and never paid me back. The guilt trips. The manipulation. This wasn't new. This was the pattern. But now, something inside me had snapped. They thought I was weak because I was injured. They thought I couldn't fight back. But they had underestimated me. Later that week, I forced myself into a cab and had the driver take me to Carter's Auto. The neon sign buzzed above the lot, casting an ugly green glow over the rows of cars. When I crouched inside, Carter himself recognized me. A short, balding man with a crooked smile. "Kate," he said, surprised. "Didn't expect to see you here." "You bought my car," I said, my voice cold. He shifted uncomfortably. "Well, your folks brought it in. Said you were getting rid of it. Didn't think much of it." My blood boiled. "How much did you pay them?" He hesitated. Seven. That car was worth at least 12. He shrugged, looking away. "Your father was eager. Said he'd take what he could get." I swallowed hard. "Did he ask for cash?" Carter's eyes flickered. That was all I needed to know. So, my father hadn't just undersold it. He had pocketed the difference. I crouched back outside, the cold wind biting at my face, and I knew I was standing at the lowest point of my life. I had nothing left but rage and the promise I whispered to myself that night. "They'll regret this," I said softly, staring at the empty space in the lot where my car used to be. The wind howled, carrying my words away, but inside they burned. I wasn't just going to take back what they stole. I was going to take more. And for the first time in days, the thought didn't hurt. Felt like fuel. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, planning. My parents thought they had silenced me, caged me in with betrayal. But they had only lit a fire. Real quick, subscribe and share your thoughts below before we get to the part that still makes my heart race. Revenge, I realized, required patience. I was still recovering, my body weak, my legs slow to support me. If I lashed out now, I'd fail. And failure wasn't an option. So I played the part. I let them think I was defeated, broken, grateful even. I ate at their table. I accepted their rides to appointments. I stayed quiet when they talked about finances, nodded when my mother said, "We're doing the best we can, Kate." But inside, I was sharpening knives they couldn't see. Every day I grew stronger. The crutches soon gave way to a cane, and then to careful, steady steps. My father noticed one evening as I walked into the kitchen without leaning on anything. "Good," he grunted, sipping his beer. "Means you can get back to work soon." Work. That was all I'd ever been to him. A source of labor, of money. He didn't notice the fire in my eyes, the quiet promise that his words no longer cut. I started digging quietly. At night, while they slept, I sifted through the desk drawers in the study. Bank statements, utility bills, scraps of mail. That's when I found the proof, withdrawals, transfers, checks written in my father's scrawl. The missing savings weren't just an accident. He'd been dipping into my account for months. I felt sick as I traced the numbers, realizing how deep the theft went. Thousands. All taken without my consent. And the car. That was just the final straw. I copied what I could, snapping photos with my phone, saving them in a hidden folder. But I didn't stop there. I went back to Carter's auto under the guise of checking on paperwork. Carter, sleazy as he was, let slip more than he intended. He admitted my father had bragged about finally getting something back after years of carrying me. If only he knew how many bills I'd covered, how many nights I'd skipped meals so the mortgage could be paid. Every word, every scrap of paper, every withdrawal slip, it was ammunition. And I was stacking it carefully, waiting for the moment to pull the trigger. The house keys sat in the small ceramic bowl by the door, the same place they'd been my entire life. My father's car keys dangled from a hook beside them. They never thought twice about leaving them in the open. And why would they? I was their daughter. The daughter they believed was too weak, too loyal, too broken to ever turn against them. One evening, when they were watching television in the living room, I palmed the spare house key and slipped it into my pocket. The weight of it burned hot against my thigh all night as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The key wasn't just metal. It was power. But I wasn't finished. A week later, I found the folder with the car dealership paperwork tucked away in my father's desk. I slid out the copies, folded them carefully, and hid them beneath the lining of my suitcase. Proof. Evidence. Leverage. Piece by piece, I was reclaiming what they thought they'd taken from me forever. There were moments, late at night, staring into the darkness, when doubt crept in. What if I was wrong to fight back? What if revenge only made me like them? But then I'd remember the empty driveway, the stolen savings, the smug look on my father's face when he said, "It's none of your concern." And the doubt would vanish, replaced by a cold certainty. This wasn't about vengeance alone. It was about justice. They had stolen from me, betrayed me, broken me when I was most vulnerable. If I let them walk away without consequence, I'd be complicit in my own destruction. So I planned harder. Harper. The opportunity came one Friday night. My father left his wallet on the counter, something he never did. He was careless after a few beers. Inside I saw receipts, proof of purchases he couldn't explain. New watch, expensive dinners, even a payment toward a trip I'd never heard about. Luxury bought with my sacrifice. I photographed everything, every receipt, every slip. Then, slowly, I began to withdraw my remaining funds and move them into a new account he didn't know existed. Quietly, carefully. It was time to flip the balance of power. By the end of that month, I had everything I needed. A proof of the undersold car and the hidden cash. A bank statement showing withdrawals in his handwriting. Receipts of luxuries bought with my stolen money. Keys to the house. Keys to his car. And most importantly, the strength to stand without faltering. I stood in front of the mirror one night, studying my reflection. The bruises had faded, the cast was gone. But what looked back at me wasn't the same man who had entered that hospital bed. This version of me was colder. Harper. Ready. I clenched the keys in my hand and whispered, "They'll never see this coming." The words tasted like iron. Final. That night, as I tucked the keys beneath my pillow, my father's voice drifted through the thin walls. "We should start thinking about selling the house," he told my mother. "Kate will cover us if we're short. She always does." My mother sighed. "Do you think she suspects?" "Of course not," my father chuckled darkly. "He's too soft. Always has been." I closed my eyes, a slow smile creeping across my lips. Soft. Oh, not anymore. I didn't sleep the night I overheard my father talking about selling the house. The words burned into me like firebrands. All these years, every sacrifice I'd made, and still he sat there planning how to strip me further, laughing at my so-called softness. But that was the moment I knew. My revenge was no longer optional. It was survival. They had taken my car. They had bled my savings. And now they were circling my future like vultures. It was time to show them that softness, when hardened, becomes steel. I started with the bank. The following week, while they thought I was at a therapy appointment, I limped into the branch downtown. I'd already moved the remainder of my money into a new account, but now I presented the proof I'd collected. The copies of forged withdrawals, the signatures in my father's hand. The manager, a thin man with round glasses, frowned as he studied the papers. "These are serious allegations, Mississippi Kate." "They're facts," I said flatly. He adjusted his glasses. "We'll need to conduct a formal review. If this checks out, your parents may be held accountable." Countable. The word was music to me. I walked out lighter, my cane clicking against the marble floor like a war drum. That night, when my parents were asleep, I slid the house key into the lock and tested it. Smooth. Silent. Then I tried the car key on my father's sedan. The door clicked open, and I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the dashboard. This wasn't about the car itself. It was about power. Access. Control. I took nothing that night. I only wanted to feel the weight of what I now held in my palm. The ability to step into their world, to turn the locks they thought kept me out. They had treated me like a child, stripping me of independence. But now I was the one holding the keys, literally and figuratively. 2 weeks later I made my move. We were sitting at the kitchen table again, the same place where they had dismissed my pain, justified their theft, and laughed about my supposed softness. My father was sipping his beer. My mother fussed with the mail. I laid the folder of documents on the table. Slowly, deliberately, I opened it and spread the pages before them. "What's this?" my father grunted. "Proof," I said. My voice was steady, calm, the way a blade is steady before it cuts. Bank statements, withdrawal slips, receipts, the dealership sales slip. I pointed at each one as I spoke. "Here's where you stole from my account. Here's where you undersold my car. Here's where you pocketed the difference in cash. And here's where you spent it on dinners, watches, vacations." My mother's face drained of color. My father's jaw tightened. "You've been stealing from me for years," I continued, my voice rising. "And you thought I'd never fight back. You thought I was weak. But I'm done being your safety net." My father slammed his fist on the table. "You ungrateful little." "Ungrateful," I snapped, leaning forward. "Ungrateful is selling your daughter's car while he's lying in a hospital bed. Ungrateful is draining her savings after she's paid your bills for years. Ungrateful is laughing about selling the house and making me cover you again." Their eyes widened. They hadn't realized I'd overheard. "Yes," I said coldly. "I heard every word." The silence that followed was deafening. Then I slid a final paper across the table. "And this," I said, "is a notice from the bank. They're investigating your withdrawals. Forgery, theft, fraud. That's prison time, Dad." My mother gasped. My father's face turned red, then pale. For once he had no words. I leaned back, folding my arms. "But I'm not here to send you to prison. Not yet. I'm here to take back control." That night, while they sat in stunned silence, I walked outside with my father's car keys. His precious sedan sat in the driveway, smug and ordinary. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove it to Carter's Auto. The dealer met me there, confusion on his face. "I need a trade," I told him. "This car for something else. Something better." He hesitated. "Your father's going to." "Don't worry about my father," I said sharply. "This is mine now." Within an hour, the papers were signed. I walked, no, strode, out of that lot with a new set of keys in my hand. Not to my old Nissan, but to something newer, sleeker, undeniably mine. When I pulled into the driveway that night, my father burst out the front door. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. I stepped out, tossing the keys in my hand. "This is what it looks like when I take back what's mine." His face contorted with rage, but there was nothing he could do. The paperwork was legal. The trade was final. The car he had relied on was gone, just like he had taken mine. And this time it wasn't coming back. The days that followed were tense. My father sulked in silence. My mother avoided my eyes. But the balance had shifted. They no longer held the reins. I did. Every time they looked at me, they saw the evidence, the proof, the threat of exposure. They saw the daughter they thought was soft, now hardened into someone they couldn't manipulate. I didn't need to scream or rage anymore. My silence was enough. My presence was enough. One evening, as I sat on the porch of the house I'd helped keep afloat, my mother finally spoke. "Kate," she said softly, "we never meant to hurt you." I looked at her, my eyes cold. "You did. And you'll live with that." She bowed her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. My father said nothing. For once, he had no lecture, no authority. Just silence. And in that silence, I felt the weight lift from me. I hadn't just taken their keys. I'd taken their control. Their confidence. Their ability to strip me bare without consequence. I had repossessed my dignity. As I lay in bed that night, the new car parked outside like a symbol of my rebirth. I thought back to the day I'd woken in the hospital. Weak, helpless, betrayed. They thought selling my car would break me. Instead, it built me. They thought draining my savings would leave me dependent. Instead, it forced me to rise. And they thought their laughter, their plans, their cruelty would keep me soft. Instead, I had become steel. I closed my eyes and whispered into the dark. Not for them, but for myself. They thought they'd sold my independence with that car. What they didn't know was that I'd just repossessed my life. And for the first time in a long time, I slept soundly. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If you found yourself holding your breath, if you felt my pain and my victory, then I'd love for you to stay with me for the next story. Subscribe to the channel today. And together we'll keep uncovering the truths people try to hide.